Yes, I am in New York City, Brooklyn to be specific.
I'm Colin, and this is Kings County Distillery. So maybe I'll just talk about how I got started as a distiller, but there is so much rich history here, not just in Brooklyn, not just in New York City generally, but even in this particular location here in the Navy Yard. So we're gonna head inside and actually walk through the distillation floor. We'll go through this entire ton of corn in 2 days. The fermentation will last for about 4 days. These are true pot stills. It's really just kind of awesome. That's good stuff. So kind of the last and longest step in the process is actually through this door, which is where all the magic really happens. So this is where it is. This is only about a quarter of all the barrels that we have in inventory. Right now we have approximately 2,400 barrels. This room is mostly for the smaller, shorter age barrels in the center of the room, and then some of the very first barrels that we've ever made around the periphery of the room, some of the oldest whiskeys. Bourbon has to be aged in a charred new oak barrel, so in our case, we get our smaller cooperage from the barrel mill. So this one has its top cut off. You can see it's a char 3 on the inside. We also use some full-size barrels from Independent Stave, which makes barrels for Maker's Mark and Buffalo Trace. Those are our longest age barrels. So the size of the barrel pretty much determines how long our whiskey will age. So from this barrel, which is the smallest size, this tends to be more of the experimental whiskeys like the peated bourbon. We have an oatmeal whiskey. Our rye whiskey is aged in the smaller barrels. At this point, our bourbon is moving to larger size barrels. So this summer, we've only been around for 6 years, so we have no whiskey older than, I think, 5 years is the oldest barrel that we have. This summer, we're gonna release a bottled and bond bourbon, which is kind of an antiquated designation for American whiskey. It was initiated in the very early 1900s when people wanted a way to guarantee that their whiskey was not adulterated by a middleman, a broker, a wholesaler. And so Bottled and Bond said that the whiskey was distilled by one distiller in one season at one distillery. And is aged for 4 years and is bottled at 100 proof at the same facility where it was distilled and aged. So in our case, our Bottled and Bond is gonna be our first 4-year-old offering. So that's gonna be really cool. It's not necessarily, I mean, people think of it as sort of downscale whiskey like Old Grandad or Old Crow Bottled and Bond. But I actually think because it is really, in a way, the highest legal class of American whiskey, that there's kind of an opportunity for rediscovery. And you can see a lot of the craft distilleries, especially those in Kentucky, are anticipating coming out with a Bottled and Bond for their releases. So I think you'll see kind of a renewed interest in this kind of very old style of American whiskey. And it's gonna be fun to kind of get that out the door. But the other thing about it is that it protects against kind of sourced whiskey, which as craft distillers, we're always sort of trying to emphasize that we make all of our whiskey, as opposed to a lot of distillers which are bottling a sourced whiskey until their regular production gets up and running, or maybe they're just bottling a sourced whiskey because they're more interested in branding or marketing. In our case, I've always been interested in distilling. That's my interest in this business. That's the fun of it. So being able to communicate that to customers, saying, we make all this whiskey on site, nobody else has touched it, that's sort of the big opportunity for Bottled and Bond for us. So I'll start you off with the Moonshine. I think this is sort of, Moonshine has something of a negative reputation, but I think it's actually instructive because people are so obsessed with age as the only thing that makes whiskey good. And if you can count, you can be a whiskey connoisseur. But when it comes to white whiskey, I'm really interested in other distillers' white whiskey because it shows their talent as distillers independent of their talent as agers. I know that how you can manipulate this spirit through the aging process. You can improve, bad whiskey through aging it. This is very hard to improve. It really is the measure of a distiller. So
here's to it.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. It's so creamy.
Yeah.
And so floral, and you get that grappa, what I think of as a grappa note in
Sure.
new whiskey.
Certainly the texture, I'm glad you pointed out, because I think the texture, by using those really traditional alembic stills, you do get a lot of the oils and esters that give it a really rich mouthfeel that a lot of companies either strip out through chill filtration or they column distill away a lot of that stuff at the outset. Next up, we'll do the bourbon.
Yeah.
So really same liquid, a little bit different mash bill on the bourbon. The Moonshine, to legally be qualified as corn whiskey, it's got to be 80% corn, whereas our bourbon has a little bit less.
You said 70, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And 30% barley?
Right.
I'm sorry, remind me the age on this. It says a year or more on the bottle.
A year or more. It's usually like
for 18
to 24
Okay.
For this release. And then we have a barrel strength straight bourbon that's 2 to 4 years old. And then this summer we'll have our first 4 year. Well, most people that are using 5-gallon barrels are pulling them at 6 to 9 months. I mean, it's
Right.
I think as far as distillers go with small barrels, I think the complaint is often not about the small barrel, but it's just underaged, even in a small barrel.
Right.
I think in a 5-gallon barrel, you almost have to go almost a full 2 years.
It's so soft right at the front. I mean, it reminds me of like a wave that you can see from way far out, and then like as it gets closer, it's building and it's growing and it's picking up energy, and then it just like crashes right over your face.
Yeah. Yeah, really. I mean, the hope is that it's very spicy. Got a lot of like cinnamon and nutmeg, black pepper even.
I could definitely see this in a cocktail. Something where you want to balance kind of a sweetness with it. You still get the creaminess from the Moonshine bottling. Creaminess sticks with it. But if you were trying to play that balance game and have maybe like a citrusy in there and then something really sweet, and then using this as like the power punch kick behind it, that's awesome.
I will give you one more as a lark.
Yes, more whiskey.
This you think you're not going to like, but you might actually be pleasantly surprised.
I mean, just even in the bottle, look at how it just like clings to the sides of the glass, even in the bottle.
I mean, this is a wild, weird spirit.
Yeah.
Very bitter. This is more used for cocktails.
Sure.
But this is actually the Moonshine that is infused with the woody part of the chocolate, which is the chocolate husk.
Okay.
So this is actually what's left over
like cocoa nibs.
after the chocolate. After the nib is actually pulled out
Yeah.
and becomes the chocolate, there's actually some nib still in there.
Yeah, yeah. But
The husk is left and has a lot of flavor that's alcohol soluble, but isn't necessarily water or fat soluble.
Interesting.
So,
I mean, like syrupy.
yes, right.
I mean, I could see this as a you said cocktail, and I'm
Yeah.
using this as like a wash in a glass, and then like letting a cocktail build around it.
Right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's amazing. I mean, you get kind of that moonshininess right on the nose. I mean, like right here, before you even get it to your lips, you can already smell the moonshininess of it. Gets onto your palate, and then it's whiskey. And then the finish is like 80% cacao chocolate bar.
Yeah. It is
awesome.
certainly like liquefied chocolate. Really bold, not very subtle. But
No, you were a man with a plan on this one.
right. But as a way to, if there's going to be flavored whiskeys in the world that exist, why not have something that's going to be a little more sophisticated, a little not aiming for the college crowd, but aiming for people who really want to add value to a cocktail or just after dinner as something kind of really weird. And dessert like it's not sweet, but it's something to sort of top off.
Colin, thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks,
Cheers,
Ari.
man. Yeah.
So that's basically the story. We're actually open for tours Tuesday through Saturday. You can find the times on our website. And then on weekends, we have our tasting room open where you can actually get served a cocktail or a flight of all of our whiskeys. So in addition to the moonshine, the bourbon, and the chocolate whiskey, which are actually kind of our sort of the three whiskeys that are readily available, we also have some seasonal infusions, and then some of the more unusual aged whiskeys like the oat whiskey, the peated bourbon. We have a barrel strength bourbon that just won Best Bourbon at the American Craft Spirits Association Awards. So all of those are available either by flight or by cocktail over in the tasting room, which is really cool. But that's the great thing about being in New York City. A lot of people find their way here one way or another, so come check us out when you're here.
A very big thank you to the entire team at the Kings County Distillery. It's this great combination of manufacturing, distillation, the engineering, the actual production side of the whiskey, and of course the passion, the want, the desire, the drive to have a great story. And then of course we get to taste whiskey as well and really enjoy the liquid and the experience with that liquid. I've had a great time here in New York. I'm gonna go across that little bridge there and do some sightseeing. Keep watching those 60-second reviews. I'll be tasting through some of the Kings County Distillery liquid here real soon on the 60-second reviews. Thank you so much to Colin, the entire team at the Kings County Distillery. Visit them online, Kings County Distillery online, and through a bunch of social media channels as well. And until we see you again, it's the Whisky Guy over and out.